Chapter 5 of All the World by Charles Monroe Sheldon. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. Recording by Adele de Pignerolles. Chapter 5 4 blocks away, up the street, stood Mr. Randall's large house, the handsomest in Bradford. Strangers and visitors were taken past Randall's, as the show place of the town. It sat back in a whole block, surrounded by elms and tall shrubbery. Dick had been in the habit of calling at all hours, and when he rang the bell he almost knew Requa would open the door, for they were early risers at Randall's. When she appeared and greeted him with a happy laugh, at first, for a few minutes of happiness, he forgot all about the real object of his call. He had been away so long from all home joys that it seemed to him almost like a dream to be with the girl he loved so deeply and gladly. And nothing was said about the future, the present was so joyous with hope. But Mr. Randall passed through the hall, and Dick saw his big form and heard his heavy step as he went on towards the front door. "Is your father going down to the mill? I want to see him." "I'll call him." Requa went out into the hall. "Father, Dick wants to see you before you go down." "All right. I thought I heard his voice." Randall smiled as Requa drew him back into the room. He greeted Dick heartily, for he liked him, and knew Requa's devotion to this one-armed soldier boy who had so gallantly run the Croix de Guerre. "I want to see you alone," said Dick, a little stiffly. Requa looked anxious. "I hope it's not anything very terrible," she said, as she went out. Dick did not reply, as Mr. Randall closed the door. Outside in the hall, Requa stood a moment very gravely. She did not intend to listen, but she could not help hearing a loud exclamation from her father. Then, trembling a little, the girl went upstairs to her own room. She was there for half an hour, when she heard the door of the room downstairs suddenly opened, and some one came hastily out of the room, opened the front door, and went out of the house. When Mr. Randall had closed the door and turned to Dick, who was standing in the middle of the room, he could not have anticipated Dick's reason for this interview. Least of all was he prepared for his own part in it. Rufus Randall was one of the hundreds of business men in America who had found in the Great War an opportunity to make big money. He counted himself a good patriot because he bought liberally of Liberty bonds, and subscribed largely to the Y.M.C.A., the Red Cross, and the Armenian Relief. He had also, with the shrewd cunning of his type, put up a large hospital in Bradford and endowed it generously. Bradford people generally regarded Randall as their leading citizen, as he was beyond doubt their richest. No one had thought of him as a profiteer until very recently. No one but himself knew what his profits were, or at least not until a government expert had examined his books. The mills employed some 2,000 persons, 2/3 of whom were women, and his wages were higher than those paid in Bayview or Carlisle. People generally regarded Randall as a philanthropist, and if they had been putting down his occupation in Who's Who, they would probably have so designated him. There is no doubt he so regarded himself. The last thing in the world he ever thought himself to be was a hypocrite. What the people of Bradford thought of him, he thought of himself. Only a few clear-headed and morally balanced men like John Ward had so far caught a real glimpse of the man as he was, unscrupulous, eager for popular approval provided it did not cost too much, self-centered in his money-making, taking chances on the government overlooking his particular transactions on account of his reputation for patriotism and generosity, pouring the one personal affection he had clung to about Requa, his only child, absolutely selfish so far as other people were concerned, unless it was convenient for him to concede something to them. This was Rufus Randall, mill owner, hospital builder, first citizen of Bradford in his own estimation, pleased with himself and his prosperity, and well disposed, at this particular moment, on this particular morning, towards himself and the young man who was engaged to his daughter. "Well, Dick," he said, good-naturedly, as he closed the door. "No use to ask why you have come over so early, eh? You wouldn't want to detain me very long, I'm sure." "I've come over to see you about Requa." "Yes, of course. Well, I feel good-natured this morning. What is it, Dick?" "Mr. Randall," Dick was talking slow and thinking fast, "do you know what a number of us in the church, in father's church, have decided to do?" "No. What is it?" Randall and Requa belonged to a prominent church in Bradford, which had not yet joined with the other churches in the federated movement. "I've decided to be a missionary." "A what?" "A missionary." Rufus Randall stared at Dick in genuine astonishment. "You a missionary?" Yes, sir. The last thing in the world? Yes, that's what I thought. But I have made up my mind. And that is where Reco comes in. My future will probably be somewhere in Palestine or the East, after I am through with the necessary preparation. Of course, we want to be married before we go, and Randall broke in on Dick, who with the word bluntness was coming directly to the point of his interview. Wait a moment, young man. Let's get down to practical matters. First of all, let's start clear. Do I understand definitely that you have positively, on an impulse, and with very small consideration, decided to make the business of a missionary your life business? Yes, sir. On an impulse? You might call it that. I never heard of such a thing. It's not practical. It's as practical as making money, said Dick, beginning to warm up under Randall's sharp questions. But you haven't had time. I asked Rekwa here last Saturday if you had any business plans, and she said you hadn't any. And now you say you have decided on being a missionary and going to, where did you say? Madagascar? Palestine, said Dick grimly, where little children and young mothers have been starving to death in very practical ways. But you say you have definitely decided on this sort of work as a life work? Being a missionary? Yes, sir. It's clear enough to me. Of course it will take some time, I don't know just how long, to get ready to go over. But the thing I came to see you about was Rekwa. Of course it means her going with me. Never! Not with my consent, Mr. Ward. I regard the whole thing as absurd and visionary. Look you! Randall suddenly pointed a big, heavy finger at Dick with a favourite gesture. What will you have to support a wife on as a missionary? Dick realized his weak position at this point, and for a moment he hesitated. Then he boldly answered, I don't know. Not yet. But missionaries are not allowed to go out unless they are married, and when they do go, they have a decent living. I shall be able to support my wife. Have you any money saved up? The question was sharp and blunt and practical, and Dick's answer was a little surprise to Bradford's most practical citizen. I had $500 in the bank when I left home. I have been able to save $1,000 during the war, and Albert's insurance money was left to me, some $8,000, payable in quarterly installments. I have enough to get married on. Oh, I see. But your plan is fanciful. A missionary? Rekha would die away from all her usual home comforts. It is not practical. It was at that point that Dick, recalling some of his war experience, and especially the events that occurred in Palestine with the Red Cross, the YMCA, and the Missionary Relief Committee, lost control of himself. He had been holding himself in check with splendid poise, remembering his father's caution. But now he seemed to see again that picture by the Jaffa Gate, the baby with the dry grass in its mouth. Practical! Mr. Randall, nothing else is practical except the gospel of Jesus Christ. What have we been fighting for over there? Why have all the moneyed crowns and thrones and businesses of the world been unable to stop the killing and the hate and the awful waste of life? Because they are not practical and never have been. I tell you, missionaries are the only really practical people there are. For if the world had spent its brains and money and energy in sending missionaries all over the world, the great war that we have just had would never have occurred. I salute the only real, practical person this world ever saw, Jesus Christ my Lord, who told his followers to go into all the world and make disciples of the nations. Dick was not given to heroics, but somehow he suddenly found himself on his feet, and his left hand went up smartly in a salute, and he stood at attention, a flush on his face and a look on his eye which betrayed his unusual outburst. If Randall was impressed by anything, he never showed it. That's all right if you feel that way, but the business of a missionary is not for girls like Wekwa. I've always believed it's a man's business, and women ought not to be asked to go into it any more than into the fighting ranks of war. But Rekwa promised to be my wife, Mr. Randall. That may be, but she did not promise to be the wife of a missionary. She will never have my consent to such a life. No matter what you say about it, it's a precarious, poorly paid, exhausting, and killing sort of life, if we may believe the missionaries themselves, and I will oppose Rekwa's participation in it with you. I'm used to plain talking, and you are getting it from me now. I like you well enough, Dick, as an individual, and admire your war record. No man in Bradford more than I do. And I should be proud and pleased to have you as a member of the family. But I love Rekwa more than I love you, and she is all I have left, and—" He spoke with a sudden passion, of which he was at times honestly capable, in a heavy, impressive manner. "I am not going to have her life rubbed out in the treadmill of a missionary's wife. She is not strong enough physically to endure the hardship. I tell you, Dick, she was not born for such a life, and I will not consent to such a sacrifice. And that's my ultimatum." "But what if Requa is willing to share the life with me?" "She will never go against my wishes." "I will see about that." Dick got up suddenly and started across the room. Randall watched him with curiosity, but had apparently no fear of the result. Then, without shifting his position, or even raising his voice, he said, "Sit down, Dick. I have an offer to make you, that I honestly want you to consider. If you go to raising the question with Requa, it will create a lot of unpleasant feeling either way. I know she will never go against my wishes. It isn't that, but I believe we can settle this matter more satisfactorily." Dick stopped halfway across the room, and sat down in the nearest chair. He had not the slightest hint of Randall's plan, and as he went on unfolding it, Dick listened at first as if Randall were proposing it to another. "Why not settle this thing on a sensible business basis, Dick? I like you, and believe in your ability and your future. I need just such a bright, alert, keen-minded fellow as you in the mills. I've been short-handed all through this war, as every one has been. I need at this minute a reliable man to take charge of my shipping department. You could learn the business inside a year or a year and a half at most. You can put your capital, all you wish, into the business. With your ability, in time you could succeed me. If you should have children, they would be well cared for. Your father and mother need you at home after all this separation. It is not just the thing to leave them to a lonely old age. It is not fair to take Greco away from me, or try to persuade her to leave me. I need her near me. You can get married at once, and come right here to live, until you have your own home. That's my offer. Isn't it more sensible than your plan? Isn't it a thing that appeals to your own sense of what is wholesome and natural? Come, Dick, come, my boy. Requa is out there now in the hall probably waiting for you. Go right out there and surprise her by telling her you have accepted an offer to go into business with her old dad, and may in time become a partner in the business." Talking with his father on the evening of this same eventful day in his life, Dick confessed that as Randall's offer became more real to him, the greatest temptation of his life assailed him to accept it, marry Requa, and settle down. And then the next moment his whole soldierly nature rose up in resistance, and he felt that he was a traitor to the best he had chosen, and to the world's real needs, as he had seen them himself over in Europe. And he found himself saying, calmly enough, but with the full strength of an assurance that he could not say anything else, "I can't do it, Mr. Randall. I have made my choice before God. I cannot repudiate that without being a coward and a liar. I cannot and will not make denial of my convictions to go in to all the world." Randall at that lost control of himself. He had made the offer in good faith and in his most seductive manner as a business proposition. To have it turned down abruptly by this young man who had no experience and no prospects angered him greatly. "Then you can make your choice and go your way, but Requa will not go a step with you. Fool! To reject an offer into the best business prospect in Bradford or the state. Why, in 10 years you could be in my place, you fool!" The next moment Randall was sorry he had spoken in anger, but it was too late. What he had said and the way he said it roused Dick tremendously. He forgot his father's calm warning to remember he was not Randall's judge and executioner, forgot he was Requa's lover, forgot all that was at stake in the matter of Requa's possible attitude, if her father refused his consent to her going away, and with only the memory of what Dr. Ward had said about Randall's profiteering, Dick burst out, regardless of all consequences. And added to the rest, as he sat there that morning facing the father of the girl he loved, and who he hoped would go with him as his wife, was the scene in front of the Jaffa Gate, and the young mother with the starved baby, and the cry of "America!" rang in his ears, and called out against this man who had taken advantage of the great world tragedy to line his own pockets. News of affairs at home had come to the boys at the front in a somewhat irregular and desultory way, but the word profiteer had become well known, and the company was in the habit of speaking of this sort of man at home as "the American Hun." As Dick recalled the scene at the second battle of the Marne, he saw, as he drove his car back during a counter thrust of the enemy, one of the American marines plunge his bayonet clear through the body of a German, draw out the weapon, throw the soldier back, step on his head, crushing it clear out of sight in the horrible mud, and with a yell spring like a wild beast on another German who had been close behind the first. The whole monstrous scene flashed out of Dick's memory as it flared up again in the fearful ending. For as the marine plunged forward, his face lighted up with the blazing light of a burning pile of foodstuff, a shattering bomb struck the marine full in the chest, tearing the upper torso apart, and the sacrifice was complete as the fragments fell scattered over the red soil of blood-soaked France, one of thousands who died that day for human freedom. And here at home, in his ease, sleek, well-fed, self-centered, self-satisfied, and physically safe, was a man who called himself an American, and was willing that the marine should give his life, and boys like Dick be mutilated for it, while he made his exorbitant profits at home, nursing what conscience he had by building a hospital, or buying Liberty bonds as a good investment financially. What Dick had said under the impulse of passion, provoked by the entire interview, was simply this: "I wouldn't be in your place, Mr. Randall, for all the money the war has cost. Your place! If the government finds you guilty of profiteering, your place may be and ought to be a state prison." For one moment Randall sat perfectly still, staring at Dick with a rage that turned his cheeks first white and then purple with passion. Then he started up, and for a second Dick thought he was going to strike him. But Randall, after raising a clenched fist and holding it up a moment, suddenly dropped it and laughed. "Profiteer! You are not my judge as to that. I have a clear case with the government, but I don't have to defend myself with you. And at that point, as if not certain of himself, or as if assailed by a fear he did not wish to betray to Dick, Randall got up abruptly, went out of the room, walked heavily through the hallway, and went out, closing the door with a bang. That was what Rekwa had heard, and she came down at once, not knowing whether it was her father or Dick who had left the house. Dick met her in the doorway, and she saw at once that something serious had happened. Dick drew her back into the room, and said, "Rekwa, do you know what I came to see your father about this morning?" "No." Dick told her briefly, emphasizing his own choice, and making clear his conviction that in making his choice he had deliberately decided his life work. "Do you mean, dear Dick, that we would have to leave Bradford, and go to Palestine, or some foreign country, to live all our days?" Rekwa asked, and Dick noted, with a strange sinking of his heart, that she was trembling as if with fear. "Yes, that is what it will mean. It will be a life of adventure and of sacrifice. But father will never consent." "Yes, he has just told me so. But what do you say yourself, Rekwa? Will you go with me?" Dick put the question with the usual Ward characteristic of abrupt and positive coming to the point. The girl hesitated. She had been luxuriously brought up. Her father had been to her, since her mother's death and until Dick Ward had come into her life, the one person in all the world to whom her thought and affection had gone out. Then suddenly, and it seemed to her cruelly, she was confronted with the necessity of making a choice which either way it lay meant disappointment and trouble for one or the other of the two people who were most to her. In that moment of hesitation Dick read his worst fears. The woman who really loved him, he said to himself, should have answered at once without reservation, "Where thou goest, I will go. Thy God shall be my God, thy people my people." But what he heard from Rekwa after that painful pause was this question: "Is there no other way? Do you mean to make this choice for us both?" "I have already told you, Rekwa," Dick was saying calmly enough outwardly, though inwardly his heart was in a tumult. "It rests with you to choose between your father and me." "Give me time, Dick. Don't ask me to choose it now at once." "But what difference will time make, Rekwa? The choice will always have to be the same. Will you live your life with me, or not? If I were asking you to come into a wrong or doubtful life, that would be different. But—" Rekwa's face expressed fear, doubt, indecision, deep trouble. It had not been hard for her to love her absent soldier, and when he came home no one in Bradford had been prouder or happier than she. But for almost the first time in her easy-going life she had to make a serious decision. It is doubtful if she understood in any adequate way Dick's decision in its purpose and its sacred meaning to him. Then suddenly her face lighted up, and almost laughed, as if she had discovered an answer to her perplexity. "Dick, oh Dick, why do you have to go as a missionary? Why can't you stay here and do just as much good? Father was saying only yesterday that he needed a man in the mills, in the shipping department, I think it was. I know if I ask him he'll let you have the place. Dick, dear Dick, think how long you have been away. And now you plan to go again. Think how happy we can be here at home. You are so quick, you can learn the business in a short time. Perhaps in time you will succeed father to the business, find yourself actually in his place. And we could get married, Dick, as soon as you wish, Dick. That is, as soon as I can get ready. And father would love to have us stay here, Dick, right here in this house. It is so big, we could have a big corner of it all to ourselves. Oh, say you will, Dick, say you will, and we shall all be happy." Again, talking frankly with his father that night, Dick confessed to him that Rekwa's appeal seemed to him to be more than he could resist. Never had she looked so lovely, and he had been gone so long from all womankind, from all the possibility of a home of his own. Once, in critical passages, the mere thought that he would ever live to enjoy such bliss seemed so remote that nothing but a succession of miracles could make it real. And here it stood now really within arm's reach, personified in this glorious, radiant, blushing girl, who had promised to be his wife, and make with him that sacred and adorable place, home. Why not take this gift of the gods, and without too many serious questions be happy? And then, again, as in the case of her father, Dick seemed to see down the trenches lines of foully bespattered human beings, the semblance of humanity, gashed with innumerable tokens of sleeplessness, watching, weariness, shell-shock, bearing in their bodies and in their memories the marks of the cruel war, holding grimly on to the things the flag stood for, willing to suffer and die 100 horrible deaths in order that the world might be safe and millions happy, instead of a few like himself and Requa. And then over the trenches flamed the ghastly banner flying above Old Glory, blazoned with the word "Profiteer," with Requa's father's name after it, branded with indelible treason. And she was asking him, the soldier, who had risked his life to free the world from just such egotists as Randall, to become a possible partner in the business that had the stain on it, after he had won the cross in a battlefield with a pure and loyal patriotism that no one could ever question. Requa was very near him. Next moment she would have yielded to his embrace. But his first word was so like a blow that she stepped back hastily, and threw her hands up as if to ward off her lover. "Requa, do you know I could never enter into a partnership with your father's business, because the government at this moment is making an official examination of his books, and he is likely to be arrested, and fined as a profiteer. Requa, I would just as soon repudiate my American citizenship and go over to the Germans, and try to secure the commercial business of which they have been stripped by the war, as to be associated with your father in a business which he has apparently conducted for his own selfish profit, while other men have been fighting for the world's life." Now Requa Randall, like other girls, daughters of rich men in America, who know nothing of the intricate affairs of business, if she ever thought of it at all, thought of it as a source of her physical happiness. And her father was to her a kind, indulgent, affectionate father. Like a blow on her heart, here stood her lover, the person she loved next to her father, charging him with monstrous wrong, and actually calling him selfish. And she drew back, threw up her head, and said the first angry word she had ever spoken to her soldier lover. "Richard Ward, my father is the soul of honour. Any one who tries to cast dishonour on him is no friend of mine. Do you understand that?" Dick received the blow standing. He was pale, and sweat stood on his forehead. "Requa," he said gently, "I do not think you understand your father's business. I don't feel able to argue with you. I have received the answer to my question. You are not willing to go with me. Oh, Requa, I don't know how I can bear it." Yielding to his feeling, Dick suddenly rushed past Requa out into the hall, and had opened the door just as Requa, swiftly repentant of her anger, came running out and crying, "Oh, Dick, dear Dick, don't go. I don't understand it at all. You know I love you dearly. Dear Dick, I'm sorry. I will—" But Dick did not even turn. He shut the door, and ran down the steps, and Requa ran into her own bedroom, flung herself on her bed, and sobbed, alternately speaking her father's name and her lover's, crying out in the first deep grief of her not over deep heart. Chapter 6